Welcome back to the Line Table. City officials announced this week that Albuquerque has made progress in all areas of compliance with the U.S. Department of Justice's court-approved settlement agreement to address excessive use of force in the Albuquerque Police Department. In a statement released by his office, Mayor Tim Keller said, quote, "Our administration is owning the responsibility of transforming law enforcement and creating a new APD," end quote. Now, on the heels of that statement, Mayor Keller also named interim police chief Michael Guyer as the new permanent chief of the department. And Michael, different Michael, Chief Guyer has been on board since December, certainly. We had a search started in May. We talked to 28 people. We met with 4. Do you feel comfortable that we ran the traps, as they say, and come up with the best? We'll talk about Mr. Guyer in a second, but do you feel comfortable with, given the churn of looking nationwide for somebody, that we overturn every rock? What do you think?
I guess I'm not totally comfortable with it, but on the positive, I guess I would have to say that I think it's helpful in many respects in terms of positive that it is someone who's been here a while, that knows the landscape, so to speak, is not going to have to get up to speed on the Department of Justice.
Right. Consent
decree is not going to have to get up to speed on the politics of Albuquerque and Bernalillo County as well as Rio Rancho. And I think there's a positive from the standpoint that he did have experience in Chicago. If nothing else, he might have learned how not to do things to some extent, although we've had our own problems here.
I like it.
We've had our own problems here as well.
Yes.
So you know, the bottom line is he has a job to do. He's accountable to the mayor. He's accountable to city council. He's accountable to the citizens of the city of Albuquerque, and I guess we'll see what we get.
That's right. I'm interested in your opinion on this because, you know, we've needed a chief for a while. It's not as if it's, you know, someone just up and quit, you know, a couple months ago and we've had to deal with this. But the same question, Michael, are you comfortable with the process? But then the follow-up is, let's get into Mr. Guyer and what he brings to the table or doesn't bring to the table. Your sense of this hire now.
It just seems like it was a very quick process.
Okay.
What I don't know is, did they do this search all internally, or did they have a contract with a search firm?
Gotcha. There was a committee of 5.
But it was just so it was just a local committee.
Yes.
So you didn't. To me, that somewhat limits your access to resources. But it sounds, from the backgrounds that I saw of the gentlemen they interviewed, I did notice it was all gentlemen. Yes. It seems like they had sufficient background to do it. I disagree a little bit with Michael. I think there are positives to the chief being from Albuquerque and knowing the area and having the experience, but I also think that hinders him in the sense that it comes with all the baggage that comes with someone who's here. So I also noticed that they were going to continue a nationwide search for his assistants.
That's right. Isn't that interesting? Yeah.
Yes. So he's good enough to be the chief, but we don't have anybody good enough to be the number 2 person.
Right. That's right.
So that seems a little strange to me.
That is interesting. I got to wonder if maybe those 4 who did come to town to be interviewed are in the running for that position that Diane's mentioning. So let's talk about Chief Guyer. Your sense of it, is it a positive for you? Because Michael Byrd makes a good point that, you know, he's not going to have to spend 4 years, a new person coming into Albuquerque, it's not going to spend a whole bunch of time getting up to speed on the little nuances that we'd love to, you know, do here, but it takes a while to get used to. What's your sense of it?
You know, it's a good move. You know, I think that his familiarity with Albuquerque, also, he's the handpicked person from Mayor Keller's administration.
That's right.
And so, you know, that has a lot to do with it as well, because, you know, and I think it provides that continuity of leadership as far as that Mayor Keller really needs to show that he's in control and, you know, that he's managing this particular issue. I like the whole process as far as involving the community. And I think that, you know, the other candidates, you know, being from urban centers, you know, really provided that, you know, diversity of background
We had one from San Francisco, as a matter of fact. Yeah.
Absolutely, and I think any of them would probably be a very fine, number two. But it really comes down to what are you going to do to continue to build upon the trust in the Albuquerque community.
Right.
I thought the announcement yesterday at the or earlier in the week rather at the Triangle substation and it reopening was really a great PR coup because they were able to say what, here's what we're up to, but not only that, we're also increasing community policing in an area that has really not seen a lot of positive headlines as far as Nob Hill with issues with art, some crime issues, some UNM issues and stuff. So overall, I think that his owning this particular issue, that they're making all the right moves so far.
Good point. I like your points here. That was interesting. So a bit of a twist here.
Sure.
Still with APD, we have a new report out about the streamlined new use of force policy. And there's a lot of positive talk about this now. Seems like things are actually sort of moving. We've had a lot of rough reports from James Ginger, the federal overseer, so to speak, who's been in this studio talking about this a number of times. What is your sense of it? Do you feel like a corner's been turned? And if it has, is this due to Mr. Keller? Is this due to Mr. Geyer? What's happened?
I really
here?
hope that it has, and I have found the information that we are getting from the DOJ, from no, I can't say his name. I think the information that we're getting, this APD leadership is much more responsive, working more closely on the issues brought up in the DOJ agreement, seeking input. And my hope is, it sounds like implementing those things.
That's right.
That's so different from what we saw under the previous administration.
That's right.
And I think if those things weren't happening, first of all, I'd be really surprised, and I'd have real concern about the sincerity and the seriousness with which these issues are taken in the mayor's office. What I'm seeing suggests to me that at least top leadership is committed to making changes here.
It feels like it, doesn't it? It really does. Michael, when you think about it, talk about things winning back the community, a good start might be to get rid of this backlog of over 120 days of use of force issues that are still hanging out there. That's an awfully long time when you're looking for justice, if you feel like you've been wronged. And let me read you a quote from new Chief Geyer. We take seriously the monitor's recommendations to address use of force reviews so we can understand the magnitude of past problems. That's interesting. We want objectivity and consistency in use of force investigations to ensure we are holding officers to the standards required under constitutional policing. That's to Sophie's point, that's very different from what we had from previous chiefs, isn't it? That understanding that the community is frustrated here and we need a different look here. Is that what you're hearing as well in this quote?
Well, yes. That's what I understand. That's what I'm hearing. And let's turn the page. Let's move to something that's positive and responsive to the community and is accountable to the community.
That's right. It's also going to cost us $4.2 million if I have the way the city budget for next year.
It is. It is going to cost us money.
That's right.
But one of the things that I particularly like is that there's not been a lot of finger pointing. It's been, this is the situation we have.
Right. That's right.
This is how we're going to work toward fixing it. I like that kind of attitude. I think the public likes that. We feel more confident that something good is going to come from that kind of approach. I'm a little confused about some of the internal things they're doing, like dividing the internal affairs into two different groups. I didn't realize that force and that misconduct didn't include force, which is one of the divisions. Misconduct is bad regardless. So I think that's interesting. And then one of the things that we've all looked at, of course, is former city attorney Pete Dinelli's.
Yeah, he's always fun to read.
He certainly has some good institutional knowledge.
Good way to put it.
He suggested that it should go back to other entities instead of he wanted to get rid of internal affairs, as I recall. His statement was. The only question I have then becomes were these groups the ones doing this investigation in the past? Who was doing it? And if so, how did we get so far behind?
That's right. Michael, go ahead. If you had
No, again, it goes back to accountability and measuring and ensuring that there's a mechanism for measuring and holding people accountable. If you don't measure it, it's not going to get done.
That's right.
I think it's worth noting on the Duke City Fix Facebook page, which is where Duke City Fix lives now, we posted information from the courts here in Albuquerque saying that traffic stops were up.
Right.
And
A bunch,
there
yeah.
was quite a discussion there from members of the community saying, why do we want to see police interacting with the community more? And my sense is that there's still lingering real distrust among many people in this community about APD. There's still real fear, and some of that fear, I think, is engendered by what we see on the national scene. Police in other places, that image and those incidents reflect back to us here. And so you see, for instance, people saying, I don't want to call the police when it's a person of color who, I'm concerned that they could get shot and killed. I don't particularly want to interact with the police myself, and I think that that's going to be the next stage, is trying to address that long-standing mistrust.
That's a good point. We'll have to wrap this up for now. And later, when we come back to the line, we'll talk about some results of the June 5th primary we didn't get to last week.